Hi. So today I'm just going to ramble about, one of the many AEW wrestlers that are injured right now, and one that I'm seeming to miss more and more every day, which is surprising. The guy we're going to talk about today is Buddy Matthews, also known as Buddy Murphy. Um, I like Buddy. I was never the biggest fan of him, and he never really stood out to me until his late 24, early 25 push. Specifically, the Adam Cole match and the Okada match, obviously. Now, I feel like when I look back on his career, I wasn't a fan from the start of his career. I've only known Buddy from AEW, really. But even when I went back to see him in the Fed, he seems like a guy who's always been like a member of a faction rather than his own guy, and that's not a bad thing. There's a lot of wrestlers that are great at that. But in AEW too, it feels like as soon as Aleister Black, Malachi Black, whatever you want to call him, left, and the House of Black had become the Hounds of Hell, and now it's just basically they're not really linked at all. Brody King's the one who's had the most, growth, ironically, about the war, like the Brodito stuff. But even as a singles guy, everyone knows how good Brody is now. And I feel like Buddy's always going to forever be tied to Brody, 100%. But I feel like Buddy, there's a lot there, I think. And I don't know what avenue you go with. I think he is now. It's sad for the injury because he had the match with Okada, which was excellent at Grand Slam Australia. And he had that match with a broken or a fractured ankle. He rolled on it in the ring and he's been out ever since. And it's a shame because, I was speaking to some friends about it. That's when he was starting to get his momentum. That's when he was like, okay, this is Buddy coming on. And it's awful timing. And the dude's jacked. Everyone knows how jacked he is. But I think he's a solid wrestler. I feel like that match with Okada was the best match I saw with Buddy. I think the best character work I saw with Buddy was probably the Cole match where he calls him a wanker. That was great. And I love that stuff from Buddy. I don't feel like, even with Brody King to an extent, it's not really one of those. I don't feel like the horror gimmick works for them. Same with Julia Hart, to be honest. But you know what I mean? Like it doesn't for Aleister or Malachi. It kind of works. For Brody's just a monster anyway, so he could do whatever. But Buddy, like I get it. I just feel like there's another avenue to go there, and I feel like Buddy himself is more entertaining. I think when Buddy's allowed to speak, allowed to have a bit of charisma, that's the Buddy I prefer. The main question I have why I miss Buddy is obviously Brodito. So what I don't know, the joke and the obvious avenue is Bandito versus Buddy for the custody of Brody King. Now, or ironically, that would be great. However, I don't think they do it that way. I think if anything, when they do eventually break up the beloved Brodito, which I don't want to really think about that, but for Buddy's return, it makes sense to go down the avenue rather than Buddy basically come in as the only heel. I feel like it makes sense for Brody to turn heel with and align with Buddy, if that makes sense. And then, Bandito facing Brody King's the ultimate payoff, but also you get a solid feud of Bandito versus Buddy Murphy, or Buddy Matthews. I've been alternating, I don't care. I think it's hard to really position him from that point because I feel like if you ask me right now of the AEW title pictures, he fits the TNT belt like a glove. Like, that's his picture. Like, if you ask me, but the problem is, there's a lot of wrestlers who go in there. The unified belt, if that's still around, that could be a good avenue for the guy. My biggest want out of all of it is when Buddy comes back, for them to stick consistently with the singles push, because I feel like they could have done that with Anthony Bowens, but it went wrong and now they're backtracking. And yeah, they're trying to make something out of it, and it's a separate discussion, but I just feel like there's a lot more there with Buddy, I think, and I feel like if they just stick by it, there's a way there, because like I said, the momentum was with the guy, and with Buddy, and it's wild to say, I don't think he's a true main attraction like an MJF or something. And this is from an outside AEW fan base perspective. I'm thinking more of there's very few wrestlers that WWE fans specifically will watch AEW for. The main one's MJF. People know that. Probably the other ones, Copeland and Christian, people like that. People they've got affinity with. Maybe, with Ospreay and Hangman. Stuff, big names. I feel like, personally, you could really market Buddy with that just because of the relationship with Rhea. Now, I don't want to kind of just degrade Buddy to being Rhea Ripley's husband, because that's not really fair to the guy. He's a wrestler in his own right. And he's kind of become that anyway, because Rhea Ripley's star is just insanely good. Like, everyone knows how big of a star she is. People outside of wrestling know Rhea Ripley for wild reasons. But Buddy can attract that because of that relationship, and because of, that relationship's obviously all over social media. You could really do stuff with that for Buddy, and I feel like that's a good avenue to go. I feel like, I'm not saying Buddy needs to be, rockets to his back. I like Buddy, but there's not a lot of stuff to do with him yet. That's why the return's so important, because where's his momentum going to be at? How are they going to present him? Is he going to be face? Is he going to be heel? Is he going to be tag? Is he going to be part of a faction again? Is he going to be a singles guy? Who knows? You know what I mean? It really does depend. And that's why I think it's very interesting to think about a guy like that. Because it's not like, for instance, look at Swerve. Swerve just come back. You know what Swerve's most likely going to go into. It's either going to be to a big-time feud or the world picture scene. Most likely both. A guy like Buddy, because he's so further down the card, but still so talented, it's a lot more, okay, so we can go down multiple avenues here, and they're all relatively interesting. Not that you can't with a Swerve, but because he's such a main attraction, such a big star, he's going to be right back in there. So Will Ospreay's out now, Will Ospreay's going to come back, be right in the main event picture, more or less. Buddy Matthews isn't going to come back and I'm going to challenge Samoa Joe. No, it's not. Cool as that could be, they'd never do that. I feel like, personally, I would go down. I think the obvious link to make is the Bro Dido stuff. It's how far off is Buddy? That's the question. I haven't read it recently, but I'd assume he's around. It's nearly been a year since his injury, so it can't be too long, depending on the severity of the injury. And that's a worry. How long is it going to take the guy to recover? However, a year seems, I feel like February is a good expectation. Maybe he comes back at a World's End. You never know. There's always possibilities, stuff like this. But the Bro Dido link is the obvious link. It's just how long do you keep... This is the problem with this. How long do you keep Bandido and Brody King as a tag? Because I love Bro Dido. I've made that very clear, hence the shirt. But also, both singles guys, I adore. That's why I love Bro Dido. There's not a lot you can do to keep Bandido specifically as a single tag guy. You can't do that for too much longer. The guy's one of the best baby faces in the company, one of the best wrestlers in the company overall this year. You can't keep him singles in tag, so you got to get him into singles competition, which they do on occasion. But I feel like for the only goal they're going to go down is tag. I feel like I don't want Bro Dido to be over, but I feel like them being champs is not a thing I'm going to expect, if that makes sense. Which is, whatever. But I personally, I'd have Buddy come in and incite the singles push between all two guys, include himself. I feel like that's a good avenue. You could have Buddy come in, basically get between or align with Brody, and then turn on Brody because that nature's already been there, making him a mega heel. Or, frankly, what would be a phenomenal way, because Bandido's still ROH champ, you could have Buddy come in, feud, and take that belt off him, obviously, and then cause him more upset between Brody, though. That could be a good way, and that's a good bit of goal for Buddy. And honestly, I feel like, because ROH is the lesser promotion, unfortunately, nowadays, compared to AEW, obviously, but the ROH belts still have a lot of weight, a lot of merit. So, if you give Buddy that belt and present him as a top guy in ROH, I've not got a problem with that. I think that's a really good avenue to go, because that TNT picture is absolutely stacked beyond comprehension. And honestly, I don't want to say there's so many guys I'd rather have the TNT belt over than Buddy Murphy. There's not. But I feel like the guy having a bit more of a presence and evolve that could be great. It's just kind of, I feel like Buddy's now just a lump of clay, and you can mold him in multiple ways, and there's multiple great avenues to go down. That's 100%. But which way do you go? That's completely up to you. Me personally, I think a top guy run in ROH would be a good call, and then have him, still feuding in the mid card. But You know what I mean? Like, that kind of works for Buddy, I think. And then you can evolve from there. You know, you got to keep the guy fit, too. It's a huge thing. And look how much... And let's have it right. Taking the ROH belt off Bandito is a huge win. That's insanely big. Because, again, one of the best wrestlers in the world. Great reign of the ROH belt. And ROH belt itself is historic. I'm all for that. I think that could be the avenue to go for Buddy. And I'd rather have that than the TNT run, personally, because I feel like there's guys like Juice Robinson, honestly, like an Ace Austin, even a Brody King, even a Bandito, being perfectly honest. There's guys that are above him in that pecking order for me, personally. And as much as I like the guy, him getting that over those people, I'm not really for. So, ROH belt for Buddy, take that off Bandito. That could be the way. I think that could be a great way to go that. And then, that would be great. You could have ROH belt. Buddy comes in, challenges, attacks Bandito. Brody's either with or against. You could flip Brody both ways. But then, if you have Buddy beat Bandito for the belt, and then that either incites a feud between Bandito and Brody versus Buddy, or Brody joining with Buddy, and then you could have Bandito and Brody both go at it for the TNT belt in some way, so you could both, kind of like what Swerve and Hangman are doing now, with it both calling the shot for the event. That could be great. I think that would be a solid way to handle Buddy Matthews' return. What's your opinion on Buddy Matthews? How would you handle his return specifically? And honestly, what's your favourite match of his singles-wise since joining AEW? Because personally, mine is that Okada match, and it's insane because the guy was injured. But yeah, what's your opinion on Buddy?